Finally, the NFL trade deadline gave us something to talk about, including some key fantasy storylines with Kelvin Benjamin going to Buffalo and Jay Ajayi to Philly. The Wonder Boy in Houston is done for the season, joining Aaron Rodgers as top quarterbacks you have to replace. What will Dwayne Brown's addition in Seattle mean for the Seahawks' rushing attack? And is Paul Richardson ready to take flight? We'll break down some of the key games with the latest key injury news, starting or sitting decisions, and much more as the OFN on PSN starts now. All right, it's Sunday, the 5th of November, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, as it's another game day in the NFL, Week 9. So we're finally into the second half of the season, and of course, for us fantasy freaks, we're a little bit more than halfway through with the playoffs looming a lot faster than the NFL. So we're going to be here every step of the way to get you ready. Hopefully win in your fantasy leagues with a little help from us. Speaking of us, let's welcome in my co-hosts. First of all, he's the chief fantasy analyst at Ourlads.com, co-host of the Bill Roden on Sports podcast on iTunes, Jamal Murphy. Jamal, did you go to the Jet game on Thursday?
I did. It was a great game from the Jets standpoint. Jets defense showed up.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Yeah. I mean, everything was good, except we still have Josh McCown. Dan Weinrich is also joining us, sports producer, longtime fantasy expert. Dan, you're also a Jet fan, but you didn't go to the game, did you?
No, but I watched it from my couch.
and did you?
It was a great game. It was a great game also on the fantasy side for Tyrod Taylor. Thanks to garbage time, he ended up with 30 points. So.
and Forte.
Yeah, Forte pull. You see, this is the one thing about fantasy that like really can aggravate the bejesus out of you is I had Forte. I'm starting him the week before against Atlanta. He does nothing, so he goes up against Buffalo. Why would I start him? I mean, one of the best rushing defenses in the league, and then he goes out and he has the game of the season. So anyway, that's fantasy. That's what happens sometimes.
Never know.
But I think we also saw, though, in the game, Jamal, that once again, Bilal Powell is definitely the number one. I mean, Forte is a good veteran guy. You know, give him his carries, give him his catches. But Powell's the big play man, and he almost had another big play touchdown.
Yeah, he almost had a couple. I think one was called back. One of his long runs was called back. Yeah, I mean, he's the more explosive guy, but in terms of number one, it doesn't look like they have one. Both of those guys are going to get playing time. Fantasy-wise, both of those guys can be good starts on any given week, even, at the same time. They're both going to get touches. The Jets do use the running game. They do use the short pass screen kind of game. So, both of them are usually good plays any given week.
Yeah, Dan, I wouldn't start these guys unless I actually had to because you don't know. I mean, I'm not saying they're bad starters. It's just that because they split them up all the time and they're not a high explosive offensive team, even though they have put up some points. It's not a preference, but it's not the end of the world. If you have to start Powell or Forte, you can live with it. It's just that I don't think that would be my first idea.
Well, it's fine as we go through this stretch of bye weeks. Everybody is going to be down a few players, but once you get past the byes, if you're still in a position where you have to start one of them, that's not ideal. There are probably other timeshares that are even less palatable, but I wouldn't feel great about starting either of them because as you saw and as you just mentioned, from week to week, the guy who gets the points. I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1 or 2 weeks moving forward to the end of the season where Elijah McGuire is the highest scoring running back on the Jets. So it's that you definitely from a fantasy perspective would like to see a little bit more clarity as far as who's the lead back. But you never know. I mean, for now you got to hold on to both of them.
And what we didn't see, Dan, was Kelvin Benjamin, which is not a surprise with the trade. And I was thinking about whether or not this is a plus or a minus, and I don't know. I mean, I think it can go either way because he's obviously going to be the man in Buffalo, which he wasn't really the man in Carolina. There were a lot of other potential options for Cam Newton. But of course, Newton's better than Taylor. So I don't know. I'm kind of, I just think it's a wait and see approach on whether this, for fantasy owners like myself who has Kelvin Benjamin, whether this is going to be a plus or a minus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. If I had to guess, I would say a minus, but very, not a huge impact either way. The reason I would have to go minus if I had to choose is because he's got years of chemistry with Newton and understanding that offense. Now he's joining this offense. It's mid-season, and it takes time to build that kind. You generally take time to build that kind of chemistry with a quarterback. Also, you're not wrong when you say that Kelvin Benjamin had to share his targets with other players, but not really great players. I mean, I don't really think of like Ed Dixon or Devin Funchess. I mean, certainly I think Jordan Matthews and I'm slipping my mind there, the Buffalo Bills tight end who's coming back.
Oh, Clay.
Charles Clay. I think Charles Clay and Jordan Matthews are clearly better than Devin Funchess and Ed Dixon. So it wasn't really necessarily that he was fighting. It was just that fighting for targets. It was that Cam and the offense was choosing not to feature him like a true number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, does he, maybe, you hear a lot about he doesn't really have breakaway ability. He's primarily using his body and his soft hands. And I don't know what he's going to be able to do with that in Buffalo. I don't. It's certainly not a situation where you're like, oh boy, now he's really going to be able to show us something.
Yep, and we'll find out though. Next game, that's for sure. He's got the extra few days to get going after the Thursday game, so I'm sure he'll be ready to go next week. All right, and that's against the Saints, by the way, at home. Let's get through these games now. Jamal in Houston, what a terrible blow. Deshaun Watson going down. You never know when any of this stuff is going to happen. You watch the games, you see how many times these guys take hits. Sometimes, they don't take a hit on the field, and you go, wow, I mean, how did that happen? And then you got to hear practice injuries. I mean, it's just crazy. So this anybody that had Deshaun Watson as their starter must have felt pretty good over the last few weeks about picking him up as a free agent, and what a find, and how this is going to help me win a championship this year. And now all of a sudden, if you don't have a proper backup, you were really scrambling as soon as you heard the news.
Yeah, luckily I don't have him in any leagues, so I'm glad other teams will suffer because of that loss.
Hey, I had him in 3.
Oh,
exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah.
That'll help me in those 2 leagues I'm in with Dan. No, I mean, it's a horrible, but overall, obviously as a football fan, it was a horrible loss. I mean, the kid was, fun to watch. Already was playing, top 5 quarterback level, which is unbelievable for a rookie. And to go down in practice with an ACL, I mean, why are they even letting him go and do anything in practice? I mean, I don't understand that. Why are you running at all? Just sit down and look at film or something. It doesn't make any sense. But now, they're stuck with like either Tom Savage or Matt McGloin. It's not looking pretty. It hurts the rest of their
I can't imagine. We just
players.
said about we just talked about Watson. Just imagine the people the owners who had Hopkins.
Right. Exactly.
And Will Fuller.
Yeah.
And Will Fuller.
It's gonna be ugly. I don't know. Maybe Kaepernick will drop his collusion case, and they still won't sign him.
Yeah, well, what he knew what he was doing when he started that. He's not playing. All right, so that's. We'll find out how it works, but we kind of know what we're gonna get with Savage, Dan. So that's it. I mean, you start Hopkins, of course, at least for a little while to see whether or not anything's gonna happen, but. I think the one that really gets hurt, Dan, is who you said, Fuller. I mean, I can't imagine Fuller is going to really amount to a starter. I'm not even sure I'd start him next week. I mean, today.
Yeah, I mean, I would employ a wait. I wouldn't rush to judgment. If you had him in your starting lineup and you have somebody else strong, or someone else that you can count on, then go ahead and switch them. But if you're going to put in, somebody like a Mike Wallace or Jeremy Maclin or one of these sort of waiver available wide receivers, I don't know if that's such a good call because, you look back to last season when Will Fuller was a rookie and he had Brock Osweiler throwing to him, certainly not considered a good quarterback by anybody's standards. Fuller was doing really well. He was, challenging Hopkins for the number one receiver position. And, he's got really rare speed, and he's shown that he has a knack for catching the ball in the end zone. So, who knows? I mean, do I think that they will both continue their production as has been thus far? Absolutely not. But they've both been like ridiculous. Hopkins had something like 250 yards last week, and Fuller had, I think, 2 or 3 touchdowns. So they don't need to keep up their production to still be worthy starters. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, that Hopkins is still a starter and Fuller isn't. I think you need to see what happens with whoever's going to be throwing to him.
But it is a foregone conclusion, I think, that Savage is horrible. So
he only played a half.
I don't like either of those guys.
Yeah, I don't. He's kind of in the same, sort of like Trevor Siemian. That's kind of what he's going to be.
Or worse.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean,
Greg, I think that the Texans would sign up for that.
Well, I think the thing is whether or not is Savage more conservative because he's conservative, or is O'Brien? Is that an O'Brien thing? We'll find out. It's something that we're gonna see, because so far under Savage, all we've seen is a very scaled back game plan that happened last year, and nothing changed in the first game of the season. So it's we'll see. Yeah, it's not looking good.
Remember, just listeners, remember the last time we saw Savage. He's actually responsible for Deshaun Watson jumping on the scene, because he looked so bad out there that they brought in the first-year rookie. They didn't wait 2 games; they waited 1 half to bring in Deshaun Watson because Savage was so bad week 1, and now you go back to him.
But to counter that, they were playing Jacksonville, who at the time we didn't think much of, but who has now established themselves as the best defense in the NFL.
There is a silver lining.
Well, he better go out there and prove it today, because you go up against the Colts.
He certainly isn't going to have as much trouble with Indianapolis. He shouldn't have as much trouble with Indianapolis.
No.
Sure.
No excuse today. Not even, he needs a couple of weeks. No excuse. Get it done today, or else it's going to be a long second half. All right.
Greg, before we leave this game, I'll tell you how vested I am. Not only do I have Watson in 3 leagues, not only do I have just Fuller in 2 leagues and Hopkins in 2 leagues, and I even have Lamar Miller in a couple leagues. I even took Houston as my elimination pool pick this week. And I'm sticking with them, because I think they happen to be playing maybe the 2nd or 3rd worst team in the NFL. So they should, that's the other side of this. If Savage does have a great game, don't necessarily expect it for the rest of the season, because the Colts are really bad.
All right. Let's go Denver and Philly. Speaking of Brock Osweiler, and not sure what this is going to do for Denver, especially going up against the best team in the NFL right now, the Philadelphia Eagles. But they do get Sanders back, it looks like. That should help. They did play Charles last week, like we thought that they should. And then he has the turnover early, of course, which was big. I thought it was kind of funny, though, that it was remarkable how much better the running game looked once they went to Charles. And he fumbles the ball, and it's like we don't see him for like another quarter, like he's some rookie that he needs to be punished. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, so he fumbled the ball. He's clearly running the ball effectively. Get him back in there, and he did play a little bit. But then all of a sudden, Booker played Jamal. So this came from nowhere. It's like, wait a second, I thought it was Anderson, and we needed to get Jamal Charles some carries. Now here comes Booker. Now, Booker looked pretty good as a rookie. Didn't do anything last year. Went into the doghouse so much that they brought in Jamal Charles. Now Booker gets to play, and he actually did look more like the rookie running back in the game against the Chiefs. So now this really becomes just. I was actually surprised Denver didn't trade Jamal Charles at the deadline, but I mean, this is just a crazy 3 running back mess now.
Yeah, I mean, you had to know that C.J. Anderson, he had a hot start at the beginning of the year, but you couldn't really be confident that he was going to be any kind of top flight running back. Jamal Charles, I haven't really seen enough to get a gauge on whether he's still even close to the guy he was. So that's just a situation you got to stay away from unless you have no other options. And still, the best option is C.J. Anderson, I think. Simeon or Osweiler, they're all garbage, just like Savage. I mean, I can't even believe the level of quarterbacks that are starting, for some teams in this league. It's just I just don't get it. It's gonna be a long day again for Denver against Philly.
You would think so. And with the Eagles, Ertz looks like he's going to play, Dan. And by the way, Alshon Jeffrey finally broke out last week. Now, is that a one-game San Francisco thing? Or, as we talked about, is that finally them getting a rapport with Wentz? And because we know how good Jeffrey can be. And eventually will Alshon be a can't-miss start every week? Well, he's not at that level yet. But that's at least a good sign. And then you've got a situation like you have Wentz and Breeze in our league, and I gotta think this is an easy choice. You got to go with Breeze because Tampa Bay's got a really bad pass defense, and you got to go up against that Denver defense. So, am I wrong?
No, I'm starting Breeze over Wentz this week. Although obviously Wentz has performed better over the season, but when it's that stark a difference as far as the opponent, where you're like one guy's playing arguably the best defense and one guy's playing one of the worst, and that'll definitely weigh in your decision. All things being equal, I would have started Wentz. I did start Wentz last week, and that paid off huge. I'm hoping Breeze will have a comeback week this week because he was putrid last week against the Bears. I don't even think he threw a touchdown. As far as the Philly wide receivers, to me, Alshon is a must start. What really has changed from last week, and I don't know if he's going to produce like last week every week, but he is the number one guy. I think what you had with Aguilar is that there were, a stretch where they were playing a number of good shutdown corners, and they were, Wentz was sort of looking to the open guy. And, most teams are going to put their best defender against Jeffrey.
Yep.
So that happens.
And they also had more chemistry from last year. They knew each other. Jeffrey new to the team.
That's true. But you didn't see that chemistry all that much because Aguilar was pretty much non-existent.
No, not last year.
He really exploded this year.
Yeah.
But I think really the question mark now is Aguilar. You continue to start him because he had a stretch of double-digit fantasy points for like 3 or 4 games in a row that you couldn't argue with starting him. Now he puts up a little bit of a dud. Do you continue to rely on him week in, week out? I don't know. I think we'll see what he can do this week against no-fly zone.
Yeah, I would say as far as Jeffrey, another case of like a slightly overrated receiver. I have him in the league. I do usually start him, but it's really because I have nobody else. He had 2 receptions last week. He had 2 receptions the week before. He does every now and then sneak in a touchdown. He has 3 touchdowns on the year. I mean, his best game was week 2. He had 7 receptions for 92 yards. Besides that, he gets you 2, 3, 4 receptions, occasionally a deep one. He had 71 yards October 12th. You know what I mean? So he's one of those guys. He'll get you that 10, 11 points, fantasy wise, and you're like, okay. But if you had someone, with a lesser name producing more, I think sometimes the name and the fact that he was, he did produce in previous years will confuse you a bit as far as his production now.
Well, I know he did have a lot of targets the week before San Francisco.
He had, but that's kind of scary too, right? He had 8 targets last week, 6 targets the week before, 10 targets, and in the game he had the most receptions is 4 receptions. So he has 2 last week, 2 receptions, 8 targets. Whose fault is that? Is it his fault?
Well, that's the thing.
Wentz's fault?
And he's
not
think that's
the number one guy. The number one guy in Philly is
like Greg said before, he's new to this team. You know, him and Wentz don't really know each other yet, and he didn't play a lot of the preseason. So they've really been building the chemistry over the course of the season. And I mean, he's a young guy. He's I think 26 or 27, and just a year, 2 years ago, when he would play, whenever he played with the Bears, whoever their horrible quarterback was, whether it be Cutler or one of his backups, this guy was a reception machine. I mean, multiple 12, 14, 15 catch games. So I think that, you know, it's just a matter of time till he shows that. And I disagree. I think he's definitely not wide receiver 1, but he's at least a high-end wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1.
All right. Next up is Seattle and Washington. And big news this week for Seattle is they get Dwayne Brown. And so we're going to find out right away. This is an opportunity to see whether or not that is going to open up the running game for Seattle. Finally, we know it'll protect Russell Wilson a little bit more. But they're going to have some balance, and that's one of the main reasons also you bring in Brown. You got to run the ball a little bit, so we'll see what happens there. But, boy, what perfect timing. We talked last week about Paul Richardson, and finally, Dan, Paul Richardson had the type of game which I knew he had in him. He needed to get more targets. He got more targets. Now, was that a one-game thing because of the shootout, or will that be the eye-opener that they do need to get him more targets because he's a playmaker? And I wonder what took them so long.
Well, it definitely looks like, you know, Russell Wilson loves looking for him in the end zone. That's the good news, that, you know, that won't go away. The question of, and I also think, like, you can definitely expect 1, 2, or maybe more of these games out of him through the end of the season. The problem is consistent targets, because you do still have, you know, I don't think there's any question that Doug Baldwin is still the number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then you still have Jimmy Graham. I don't know if he's 2 or if 2 is tied between Jimmy Graham, Paul Richardson. But then, of course, you also have Tyler Lockett. And while Richardson had the huge game because of touchdowns, I think Tyler Lockett had something like 130, 40 yards receiving last week too. And he's a rare talent as well. So will one of them emerge, or will they kind of keep trading back and forth good games? Now look, I ran out and grabbed Paul Richardson in a couple leagues. So I would love to see him emerge. And I kind of have more faith in him than Lockett at this point, just because of those end zone looks. But I don't think either one of them is a sure thing. I think I'm not starting Richardson this week because I have better options.
Well, I think the good thing, Jamal, is that at least with Richardson is if you would hope that if you have him that he's going to have not just one of these games every 8, but maybe now more of those every 3 or 4. And the games that he doesn't have the big ones, at least he's doing something. So he's not being completely shut down. So even if he doesn't have a big game, at least he's giving you potentially 10 points. And there's nothing wrong with that while you're waiting for the bigger games. But, of course, you're hoping for a lot more.
Yeah, it's just muddled. But the good news is I think it does look like Wilson and Seattle, it's more of a passing attack this year. They're starting to abandon the run more. Wilson's throwing the ball a lot more. But he does have multiple targets. As Dan said, Baldwin's the guy. And then after that, I think it's a crapshoot. I always thought that Graham would be, the guy there, and he never has turned into that true number 1 target tight end that I thought he would be when he went there. But so it's going to be spread out. It's going to be spread out. So Lockett's going to get his chances. Richardson's going to get his chances. So just like Dan said, any given week, between Richardson and Lockett, it's going to be a crapshoot.
Well, yeah, and we'll find out, especially this week, because Washington, they are just psychologically they're just damaged. They are just not going well. The injuries are just incredible. Reed is injured again. Big shock for Washington. I don't think he's playing today. So yeah, I don't think you touch. Honestly, I don't know how you touch him. And it was also kind of funny because you were slamming Crowder last week, wondering where he was, Dan, all season, and and they must have listened to you because he had the game of the season.
Yeah, I noticed that. He's not on any of my rosters anymore. He's long gone from the waiver wire, but I don't.
Well, he's out today with a hamstring, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. Just because Crowder had one big game, I wouldn't necessarily annoy him either. Their offense is definitely is somewhat inexplicable. It seems like the only guy you can count on is Chris Thompson. But I will say, I think it's in our league, guys. Somebody dropped Jordan Reed. Did you guys see that?
He probably should be dropped. But then again, it is a tight end league. But who dropped him? Was that you, Jamal?
No, but I've considered it a little bit. I mean, he is always injured. He did have a big game last week, or the week before, I think 2 weeks ago. He had a very big game. But I mean, he's definitely been a huge disappointment. I can see why you would get frustrated and drop him, especially in a 10-team league.
I made a mistake, guys. It wasn't in our 10-team.
Vernon Davis has produced more, and even when Reed was healthy. So, but I have him in 2 leagues and have not dropped him yet.
All right. Baltimore, Tennessee, a lot of news here. It looks like Flacco is going to play. And by the way, if Baltimore is going to make a run, this is the time for them to do it after the Miami win last week because apparently Macklin's going to play again. Wallace is supposed to play. And even Max Williams is supposed to play, their best tight end. So this could be the healthiest offense that they're going to have all season because they're not getting Yanda back. So if they're going to show anything coming off the Miami game, this could be the day. So keep an eye on all those guys because Max Williams is a guy, Jamal, that is very talented. We know Flacco wants to throw to his tight ends, but he's got to stay healthy. I'd keep an eye on Max Williams today. If he has a pretty decent day and he stays healthy, he's not the worst idea for a sleeper pickup in the next week or two.
Yeah, I tend to just completely stay away from Baltimore. I'd rather not watch them on TV. It's just an ugly team. You never know what's going on with the running back situation. Who's going to get more carries between Collins and Allen, and who knows who else. And then the wide receivers you mentioned, none of that sounds sexy. So I'm going to stay away from Baltimore completely.
And then Corey Davis comes back. Not sure how much time he's going to get, Dan, but I picked him up. I had an opportunity to pick him up in one of my other leagues because I know how good this kid can be, and he was off to a good start before the injury. I think with Mariota there, I think that within a couple of weeks he could be the number one guy there, but he's got to stay healthy, and we'll see what kind of production he gets today as far as a little bit of a warm-up.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who has the opportunity to grab Corey Davis, take him because, you remember what happened with Odell Beckham a couple of years ago. He was real heralded coming out of school, and he was injured in the beginning of the season, and people pretty much forgot about him. And by the end of the season, he was literally a top 5 wide receiver to start. And am I saying that Corey Davis could do that? Absolutely, 100%. There's some history of guys being drafted in the top. What was his? He was in the top 5, right, Greg?
Davis, he was right around. Yeah, he was right around the top 7, something like that. Yeah.
So when wide receivers are picked that high, they have a strong history of performing well immediately. And like you said, when he was in earlier in the season, I think he had like 9 catches in a game or something like that. So he's definitely a big-time guy who, it's just a question of health. And mind you, like Marcus Mariota, it seems like, it's funny, going into the season, they're like, oh, man, he's got so many targets. Well, it seems like he has no one to throw to because basically Rashard Matthews has been the only consistent pass catcher for the Titans this year. Delaney Walker's banged up. Eric Decker has been completely invisible. So I think there's a good chance Corey Davis, if he can stay on the field, will have a big time impact.
Yeah, and he did go 5 just before the Jets, which was also one of those really nice moves for if you're a Jet fan, because that gave you the opportunity to draft Jamal Adams, which we were all giddy about. At least Jamal me and Jamal, we were pretty giddy when Jamal Adams' name was still available. Okay, quickly, San Francisco and Arizona, Jamal, and now we're gonna get Stanton, and then I guess Garoppolo is coming in soon, possibly. I wouldn't be surprised if Gabbert was the guy at some point, real fast. Stanton's nothing, but this is just a mess now. So if you've got, I mean, do you even start Fitzgerald, Jamal?
No, I sit Fitzgerald. I sit all the wide receivers on either one of these teams.
Garcon's out, right?
He's out.
Garcon's out for the season.
Yeah, Garcon's out for the season.
Staley's out.
You have a Hall of Fame quarterback matchup here, so it's gonna. Obviously, I'm joking. Let's just get rid of this game completely. Just do not start anybody on any of these teams. Maybe Adrian Peterson, because they're gonna lean on the run.
Okay, so you'd start Peterson.
I disagree. I mean, I definitely like starting Adrian Peterson, but I'm not sitting Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald is a catch machine. No matter if I went in there today, I could get 5 catches to him. I mean, he's got magnets in his fingers or something. But he's produced without Carson Palmer before, and I think he'll continue to do so. Do I trust any other of their wide receivers? Hell no. But I'm still starting Larry Fitzgerald, and on the other side of the ball, we're still starting Carlos Hyde. But that's about it. So,
All right.
I guess I don't strongly disagree. I partially disagree.
And if you have, and of course, if you're in a whatever, what do you call those leagues? Those
with defensive players?
No. Lifelong leagues. What do you call those things? There's two. When you for
keeper league.
Yeah, what is it? Keeper. What's the other term? Keeper league, and what's the other term? There's 2 terms, right? There's keeper, and there's that other thing that they use.
There's another, but it's the same. And legacy or something. I don't know because I'm not in any.
Maybe that's it. Legacy, yeah, something like that. But anyway, Garoppolo is definitely a guy that you can you can look at if you're in that situation. But we aren't. At least none of us. You're not in any, right, Jamal?
Dynasty League.
Dynasty League. There you go. Yeah. All right. So, in a couple, quickly, a couple others: Oakland, Miami, and after what happened with Kansas City, a clunker for Oakland against Buffalo. So, Amari Cooper, Jamal, Amari Cooper.
I mean, just the Oakland team in general. I mean, a huge disappointment. First couple of weeks, we thought, we're talking about Super Bowl and great offense, and that's gone. I think you still start Amari Cooper unless you're in great shape at wide receiver. Same with Crabtree. But Marshawn Lynch is back. I don't know if that's good or bad for his owners. I don't know. I don't have him in any league, but it doesn't seem like he's produced that much this year. I think the other side is definitely the more interesting situation, intriguing, is Miami. They traded Ajayi, so now it's between Kenyon Drake and Williams. I think Drake gets the first and second down carries. Williams, who had a lot of catches even with Ajayi there, probably keeps that same role and still probably gets you some points. So both of those guys are possible plays, I think, this week.
Yeah, we're going to find out, Dan. Matter of fact, you have Williams, right? I know I have Drake. So I guess we'll find out who the number one guy is going to be. Maybe they're switching each week, so we really don't know. And then you still have Blunt, Jamal?
Yeah, so Blunt, not happy about that. I have no idea what his role will be with them getting Ajayi. He wasn't getting all that much action before Ajayi got there.
You start him this week against Denver, Blunt?
No, I don't. No, I might not. I probably wouldn't start him regardless, even if they didn't get Ajayi against Denver. But now I don't. I think you sit him no matter who they're playing, and let until further notice, till we see what his role actually is.
All right, and then Detroit, Green Bay. We'll get another look at Hundley, Aaron Jones. So that could be big on a Monday night for a lot of teams out there. Stafford didn't have any touchdown passes last week, but he was able to throw the ball. And Marvin Jones, we talked about him. Could he have another game? And he did, Dan. He had a second good game. So, and this was the location that he had the breakout game last year in Green Bay.
Yeah, I go on the record and guarantee Matthew Stafford throws a touchdown this week.
Okay.
Which I don't really think is that.
To Marvin Jones?
I don't know. I hope so because I'm starting him again, but I don't know. I wouldn't guarantee that it would go to Marvin Jones, but I do think that was definitely a rare occurrence for Stafford to not throw.
And would you start? I mean, in my other league, I was going to start. I'm going to start Stafford over Wentz. Would you do that this week?
No.
Against a Green Bay secondary, you wouldn't do that.
I look. The reason I barely wanted to start Drew Brees over Carson Wentz because when we're talking about like the number 1 or 2 performer, because if I'm not mistaken, I think Deshaun Watson to this date is number 1. Although actually, no, it is Wentz. So when you're talking about the number 1 guy overall, you pretty much want to start him regardless of matchup. So obviously Denver, really tough defense, but Philly's at home and nobody's been able to slow him down. So now I have an opportunity where I can start Drew Brees, who's projected to be also in the top 2 or 3 this week. Matthew Stafford, that's a little tougher for me. Do I think Stafford is a good start? Absolutely. But Carson Wentz, again, number 1 QB in fantasy. It's sort of at this point, unless you have a really, really strong alternative, he's sort of matchup proof.
I'd also keep an eye on the weather, of course, in Green Bay. With starting to snow out west. Jamal, which way would you go?
Between Stafford and Wentz, I agree with Dan's argument. It's tough to argue with that. You probably stick with the hot hand, but I like Stafford's matchup against Green Bay. The only thing it's all about to me in this situation, how you're going to feel afterwards. If worst case scenario, if Stafford has a good game, and you start Wentz. You're justified. Oh, Wentz, he was playing so well over the year. If Stafford has a dud and Wentz has his regular game, you're going to kick yourself.
Outsmarting yourself is what he's talking about there.
Have there been games this year that Denver's given up passing yardage, touchdowns?
They gave up last week to Alex Smith.
All right.
I mean, actually, they've given up passing. I mean, they gave up a lot to Prescott in Dallas, but it was all garbage time because they shut down the run, and then Dak was behind and he threw for a lot of yards. Second half it was meaningless, but he did put up numbers.
Okay. By the way, Winston's going to play again this week, I guess. I don't know why. I don't know why they don't shut him down and fire Dirk Cutter and move on. But I guess they want to re-injure Winston again permanently.
Where's Lovie Smith?
Oh. And Freeman was limited this week. Is he going to be? Is he going to start on today? Do we know?
I'm expecting him.
Yeah, he's starting. Will he be productive is the question.
And Justin Houston, he's banged up, right, for Kansas City against Dallas and Zeke. So I don't know. Of course, that'll be big if Kansas City doesn't have their top pass rusher in there.
But, he was a monster last week. So.
But maybe he was just. Maybe they were just.
I don't know if they're going to need him against Tom Savage. I'll be honest.
Who's that?
Yes. He said, I don't. He doesn't know if they'll need him.
I'm sorry. I got
Tom Savage.
They're in Dallas.
Oh,
I got mixed up with the Indy game.
Yeah.
No, they'll definitely need him against Dak Prescott.
Yeah. Yeah, they will.
I still like Kansas City though. I think that they're a more sound team all around.
All right. Any other injuries or key decisions you guys have to make this week?
Delaney Walker, questionable. Didn't practice most of the week. Limited practice Friday. So if you have him, be prepared. It's a game time decision. Have a backup tight end there. That's all I got to add to injury reports.
Anything, Dan?
Yeah, most of mine are pretty. Like I said last week, in these lean bye weeks, generally you're just trying to get a starter. It's a luxury if you're choosing between who to start. My only, I guess, questionable one would be Paul Richardson, Nelson Aguilar, and Jordy Nelson. So I can start one of those three. Who you guys got?
I would go with Richardson just because Denver, and then Aguilar's got 3 or 4 other guys to compete with, and Hundley I don't trust. Jamal?
What was it?
Aguilar, Richardson, or
Jordy Nelson, Paul Richardson.
I guess I would go Jordy Nelson there. Just I don't trust Huntley either, but he's had a week to prepare. Jordy Nelson is the guy there.
That's another guy that's going to get fired. If the Packers end the season losing 6 straight, it's time to fire Mike McCarthy.
Hey, I've never been a big McCarthy guy. I do think he's ridden A-Rod's coattails, but they're not going to fire him in a year that he didn't have Rodgers.
Yeah, but that's the whole idea. Is that if you can't win games without Aaron Rodgers, what are you doing here? You can't even win more than 1 Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. What are you doing here?
I agree with you, but they're gonna trust me. They're gonna give him that excuse.
I know. All right, guys, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next Sunday.
All right.
All right.
All right. Enjoy the game.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, excellent. Great job as always. Thanks for tuning into our show. We'll see you next Sunday morning and every Sunday morning throughout the football season with Jamal Murphy, Dan Weinrich, right here on the Ourlads Football Network. Don't forget you can check out all our on-demand shows on YouTube or iTunes. That's under Prime Sports Network. And follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock when we recap a wild week, wild day in college football and everything that takes place today in the NFL on OFN Weekend Review. So thanks for tuning in with us. Also check out Jamal Murphy's content during the week at ourlads.com right here on OFN Fantasy. We'll see you next time.